Keeper of the Lost Cities, Everblaze, Chapter 6. There must be some mistake, Jurek said, for the dozenth time, as he combed through Sylvanie's mane, checking for other trackers. No one could have gotten near either of the alicorns without my knowledge. The rebels always find a way, Sophie whispered. They'd snatched her index from a cave right outside her home, and tracked them down in streets of Paris after the Black Swan helped them escape. They'd thwarted Sandor's goblin senses and snuck into Havenfield's pastures without being detected, leaving behind nothing but a single unidentifiable footprint. And most impressive of all, they'd somehow followed her and Keith across the ocean in the middle of the night, even though they were flying on the back of an alicorn, headed to a cave only the Black Swan knew existed. We need to tell the council to move Sylvanie out of the sanctuary, she decided. To where? Jurek asked. Where else could possibly be safer than this? Clearly there's a few holes in the security, Keith said, stroking Sylvanie's nose to keep her calm. How long has Greyfell been acting weird? Not long, maybe 3 days. You're sure it was 3? Keith asked, glancing at Sophie like it was supposed to mean something. Jurek nodded. I remember him snapping at her when I was giving Sylvanie her bath, and I only bathe her once a week. What happened 3 days ago? Sophie asked, when Keith turned slightly pale. That's when my dad had the influxers installed, because the patrol had found those strange footprints. But Greyfell didn't see an ogre, Sophie reminded him. He saw figures in black. True, Keith agreed, unless... Their eyes met again, and this time she did know what he was thinking. Unless the rebels and the ogres are working together. Those footprints were not ogre tracks, Jurek interrupted. As he dusted off his hands, ogres leave a trail of stink everywhere they step. Those prints smelled like ash. Ash? The word tasted sour on Sophie's tongue. The rebels had at least one pyrokinetic in their ranks. Maybe he'd found out how to use fire to hide his scent. But then why would the tracks look like ogre prints? Either way, Sophie said, holding out the tracker to remind them someone put this in Sylvanie's tail. And I'd like to know why, wouldn't you? Keith took the tracker from her and studied the glittering crystals. Think they can hear us right now? Sophie backed a step away. Can trackers do that? No idea. But just in case, he held the tracker up to his mouth like a microphone. Yo, bad dudes, if you're listening, you should know that I've been practicing my aim with goblin throwing stars. A lot. If you touch one more hair on Sylvanie, I will come at you with everything I have, and I promise I won't miss again. Sophie shuddered. She'd watched Keith clip one of the rebels across the shoulder with Sandor's bladed disc-like weapons, and she didn't want to be there again when one hit the mark. Maybe this is all just a misunderstanding, Jurek said after a second. Maybe the disc is just a decoration or something. I've never seen a tracker with crystals on it. Have you? No, Sophie admitted, but it still looks almost exactly like the tracker Sandor has sewn into my clothes. She could feel the faint outline of one in the lining of her sleeve. They're gold, and they have slits where the crystals are, but the rebels probably went with sparkly silver so it would hide better in her tail. Right, Jurek mumbled, sounding as tired and defeated as he looked. I've worked around the clock trying to keep Sylvanie safe. And when I tell the council that the rebels managed to get past me, no one's going to blame you, Sophie promised. Won't they? The alicorns are my responsibility. And it's a responsibility someone like me is... And it's not a responsibility someone like me is normally given. When I started the sanctuary, I was basically a poop scooper. And now I have to tell the council that the rebels slipped under my nose and tagged their precious alicorn? But the council understands how sneaky the rebels are, Sophie reminded him. Jurek laughed darkly. The council understands nothing. They sit in their crystal castles, bathing in their own brilliance, while their emissaries are out doing their dirty work. They have no concept of what it's like for the rest of us. And worse yet, they don't care. All they care about is keeping their status quo. Sophie glanced at Keith, not sure how to respond. She'd heard whispers and murmurs against the council before, especially in the wake of her kidnapping. But she'd never heard someone condemn the council so openly. and she couldn't necessarily blame Jurek for what he was feeling. The longer she lived in the lost cities, the more she realized that the things weren't as perfect as elves wanted them to be. "Let me talk to Alden," she said after a minute. "He does understand how ruthless the rebels are, and he's not afraid to stand up to the council if he has to." He'd come to her defense more times than she'd like to admit, and he didn't hesitate to bend, or even break a few rules if he needed to. The fact that he'd spent years searching for her when no one else was willing to believe that she existed was proof of his determination. "Alden will know what to do," she assured Jurek. "And if he decides we should go to the council, I know he'll make it clear to everyone that whatever happened here isn't your fault. I doubt Alden Vacker will give a second thought to someone like me." But Jurek moved to Greyfell's side, kneeling in grass to stroke the still unconscious Alicorn's sleek silver mane. It was obvious how much Jurek cared about the precious creature, even before he whispered, "Do what you must." "It's going to be okay," Sophie willed the words to be true, as she took the tracker back from Keith and stuffed it in her pocket. "We'll go to Everglen now." "This sounds like a great plan and all, but, how are we supposed to get there?" Keith asked. "You and I both only have home crystals, and I'd rather not deal with my father right now." "Why can't you teleport there?" Jurek asked. "Well, I thought we established the whole Foster can't teleport through solid objects thing already, but maybe I missed something." "You did." Jurek motioned for them to follow him as he walked several paces away. "You're forgetting where we are." It looked like they were standing in the middle of an empty meadow, but when Jurek pounded his palm in the air, it made a strange thump sound, and he curled his fingers and turned his wrist to the right. An arched doorway opened to the snowy outside world. "Okay, that's awesome," Keith said, staring at the icy mountains. "You better hurry," Jurek warned them. "This exit is technically only for emergencies." Sylvanie tried to follow, but Jurek held her back. "It's going to be okay," Sophie promised, throwing her arms around Sylvanie's shimmering neck. "I'll visit you again soon, and I need you to be extra careful in the meantime," she said. "Careful," Sylvanie repeated. "Friend, Sophie, Keith." "Come on, Foster," Keith said, dragging Sophie out into the cold. "We gotta go, and let's not try to get trapped in the darkness this time, okay?" Snowflakes and wind blasted their faces as they trudged across the icy ground, and Sophie was too freezing to hesitate when they reached the edge of the steep cliff. They jumped off the mountain together, screaming and flailing until the sky cracked open and they plummeted into the void. Thunder crashed as the sky split, and Sophie and Keith tumbled across a patch of sunlit grass, coming to a stop on the path leading up to Everglen. Sophie had seen the crystal and gold mansion hundreds of times, even spent a few nights in one of the guest rooms, but she was still struck by the way the elegant building screamed wealth and power as it sparkled in the sunlight, like it was the kind of place only the best of the best were allowed to go. The elven world didn't really have celebrities, but the Vackers were close. Not that any of them seemed to notice their position. Keith groaned as he sat up, rubbing his left shoulder. "I think we need to go. I think we need to work on your landings, Foster." Sophie nodded, stretching her sore legs. "Well, look who dropped out of the sky," Alden said behind them in his crisp, accented voice. Sophie grinned as she turned to face him, but her lips fell when she noticed Alden wasn't alone. Not that Sophie didn't like Counselor Kenrick. In fact, the red-haired, wide-smiling counselor was one of her favorites. But he was always first. In fact, the red-haired, wide-smiling counselor was one of her favorites, and he was always one of the first to take her side. But there was something foreboding about Kenrick's amber-encrusted circlet and jeweled cape, especially paired with Alden's equally regal attire. Kenrick clearly wasn't at Everglen for a friendly visit, and the counselors only made house calls for something really important that was going on. "You two certainly know how to give somebody a heart attack," Kenrick said, laughing as he nudged Alden. "And I'm pretty sure you made this guy squeal." Alden laughed. "I think you're right, my friend, though in my defense, No one's arrived directly inside Everglen since I installed the gates a few decades ago. An enormous glowing fence surrounded the entire estate of Everglen, and the metal bars somehow absorbed all the light, preventing anyone from being able to leap directly inside. It was a security measure Alden added when he became an emissary for the council, though he had never explained exactly what or who he was trying to keep away. "Sorry," Sophie mumbled. "I guess we should have hailed you before we came." "Nonsense," Alden assured her. "You're welcome to drop in any time. I just never realized you'd do it so literally. But I should have known you'd find a new way to amaze me." "What about me? Don't I amaze you too?" Keith asked. "Yes, I'm always amazed at how quickly you manage to find trouble," Alden teased. "And judging by the looks of you two, it seems you've had quite the adventure today. Did something happen at the sanctuary?" Sophie glanced at Keith, trying to figure out how much to say. She didn't plan on having to tell the council herself. "I think I'll let you guys talk privately," Kenrick jumped in, almost like he knew what she was thinking. "But you'll let me know if there is anything I need to be aware of?" he asked Alden. "Of course." Alden nodded a slight bow, and Kenrick did the same as he pulled a pathfinder out of his cape's pocket, and adjusted the round crystal at the end of the edged ward. "I'll be back in touch as soon as the arrangements have been made," he said, glancing quickly at Sophie before he held his pathfinder up to the sun. "Oh, and give my congratulations to Bianna." "What did he mean?" Sophie asked after Kenrick glittered away. She'd meant the mysterious arrangements Kenrick had mentioned, but if Alden realized that, he'd pretended not to. "I fear I must leave you in suspense," he said as he led them to the crystal towers and pulled open the tower's silver door to Everglen. "Bianna will never forgive me if I spoil her surprise."